Welcome to the Passive House podcast, brought to you by Passive House Accelerator, a catalyst for zero carbon building. For news, inspiration, and connections from all flavours of Passive House, check out passivehouseaccelerator.com. Sign up to receive regular updates about events, get your technical questions answered, and contribute to the community forum. There's loads of free information for experienced professionals and people just starting out on their Passive House journey. We hope to see you at one of our construction, tech, or weekly Global Passive House Showcase webinars. In the meantime, here's this week's Passive House podcast. Welcome back to the Passive House podcast. I'm Matthew Cutler-Welsh, coming to you from an office. Actually, I'm back into the office in Auckland here in New Zealand.
Nice. I'm Zach Semke. I'm in Seattle, Washington. So tell me, you're feeling better?
I'm feeling better, and things are gradually returning to some sense of normality over here. Although, we're still not out of the woods by any means, and people are, I think, thinking about how they're going to live and work differently. But it is nice to see a little bit of life back in the city and in the restaurants and active people doing activities, that sort of thing. Mind you, we're starting to cool down a little bit now. We've both all changed our clocks, so we're off summertime here and starting to get shorter days. And no doubt we'll start getting people thinking about what their heating options are for the coming winter fairly soon, because it tends to happen this time of year.
Right. It was getting beautiful here. Today is our first 70-degree day of the year, which is 21 degrees Celsius for those listening, and which will be a handy conversion when we listen to the interview, because the interview, because Adam talks about 22 degrees inside, which is a wonderful 72 degrees Fahrenheit. So a little preview there.
Yeah, and they've also had a very wet time recently, uncharacteristically wet. There's been quite severe flooding on the east coast of Australia, which has affected southern Queensland and northern New South Wales. So luckily, where Adam is based, it hasn't been as bad, certainly not the extent of flooding, but there has been a very unseasonal amount of rainfall, which has, I think, just, it certainly, it causes problems when anything, any large event like that occurs, but it's also, I think, made people realise that these events are happening, and they're happening more severely and more frequently, and they're having a real impact on people's lives and livelihoods. So I think we're going to, unfortunately, see more of that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's. I'm excited to get into the chat with Adam, but before we do, we've got a few people to thank.
Indeed. So big thank you to our sponsors that make this work and the podcast possible. So our founding sponsors are 475 High Performance Building Supply, Baxt Ingwe Architects, Glavel Foam Glass Gravel, Minutair All-in-One HVAC and Dehumidification Units, Mitsubishi Electric Train HVAC US, Partel, Rockwool North America, Stocorp, and Zolo Windows. Our champion sponsors are Icon Windows and Doors, Proseco, and SIGA, and our stakeholder partner is NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. So big thank you to our sponsors.
All right. So Adam Souter of Souter Built, he does a pretty good job introducing himself, so I won't spend too much time or hand over to Adam. But I think, just by way of introduction, for the project that attracted me to wanting to speak with Adam was Pepper Tree, which most Australian people who are involved in Passive House will have heard of Pepper Tree by now, because it's very unique and stunning. I think I first must have come across it through some social media, whether it's Instagram or Facebook or some a post because it lends itself to some pretty amazing photos. It is a U-shaped house wrapped around a large tree, and that has lots of challenges, regardless of the construction, but particularly as a passive house because of the additional surface area of having a U-shaped house. But Adam and his team have made it work, and it's got a few extra surprises that that they're making use of that house to sort of promote what Adam does and the opportunity for passive house in places like Australia. So hope you enjoyed this. It was great to have a chat with Adam. Really enjoyed learning about his journey and this project in particular. So here he is, Adam Souter of Souter Built. He's based in Illawarra, just outside of Sydney, Australia.
Great. All right. Hey, well, thank you, Adam, for joining us from wet Wollongong. It sounds like most of New South Wales and the eastern part of Australia is very damp at the moment, unseasonably damp.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
No worries. We're going to get into the pepper tree project in a little while because it's such a fantastic project, and I gather that it's attracted quite a lot of attention, rightly so. But before we do that, let's talk a bit about you. How did you get into building in the first place?
Okay, so I grew up in Sydney in the eastern suburbs. Probably my uncle at a young age got me into building, and just he was kind of like an all-round handyman kind of guy. He could do anything. He could rebuild a car engine to build a house in West Texas. So that's probably where my love of building came from at a really young age. But then when I finished school, I got a carpentry apprenticeship. I worked for a couple of different builders until I found the right one. And they were a family building company in the eastern suburbs. And they predominantly specialised on heritage renovations, terraces around Paddington and all of those suburbs. So I evidently trained as a heritage builder / carpenter. I didn't choose that path. It just kind of happened. And I learnt a lot of contacts, learned a lot of techniques, and I've kind of carried that with me through my career and kept all those contacts really close. So that's kind of my journey of getting into building.
Yeah. When you say you looked for the right company, did you know what you were looking for, or was it a case of you know it when you see it?
Yeah, it was. So my first boss was a carpentry contracting company. I was doing a carpentry apprenticeship. But it kind of got a bit monotonous where we were doing the same thing over and over again. I couldn't see myself progressing kind of as in my career. And then my next boss was a plumber builder. I learned a lot through him and the things that he did. We did a vast array of different things, a lot of nightclubs and pubs. So learned a lot of
building them, not hanging out in them.
Not hanging out in them. And then when I got into my final employer through my apprenticeship, they were a building company. So not just carpentry, all aspects of building, from digging the footings to pitching the roof. So I just found myself really immersed in that because I wasn't just doing my trade, I was learning all these other trades, and it was a really great environment, really nice guys, and really nice work. And I think that's one thing that you don't appreciate until you get it. There is some really crappy work out there, and people just are doing it to make ends meet, and that's fine. But when you actually do some really beautiful work, and that's when you kind of fall in love with your career, and that's what I found with my last employer.
Yeah, because you mentioned carpentry. I imagine that some builders could end up just doing carpentry and essentially just framing and doing kind of the structural parts and then moving on to the next project without getting the satisfaction of finishing a project.
That's it. Yeah. So I think that's it. You're on one project and you'd be there for 6 months to a year, sometimes longer, depending on the complexity of it. And you would see it from footings to lock up, and even just the experience of, they're on the final day just doing the finishing touches and the clients are moving in, and they're kind of.
And I imagine you form quite a relationship with the project owner or the owner of the building over that time.
Yeah, exactly. So, and now come full circle. Now I'm a builder, and having that satisfaction of meeting a client, giving them their expectations of what they're expected to receive, and then surpassing that and really getting an awesome kind of excitement of when they receive their newly renovated or new house.
What does heritage mean in the context of buildings in Australia?
So there's two types. There's heritage conservation areas where they are kind of like suburbs, but just areas in suburbs that have a historic kind of facade, and that needs to be kept without being changed.
And so that's usually a rule as part of the council regulations.
Yeah, like the LEPs and DCPs, there's different legislations for different councils. I like to say to my clients that all councils are like little countries, and they've all got their own little rules.
That's true, yeah.
So, heritage conservation areas, I'm pretty sure off the top of my head, a historic, something that has to be classified as historic has to be 50 years and older. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that's it. And then you've got heritage listed. So you've got like a heritage listed item, a 200-year-old church, 150-year-old church that you cannot do anything to it, not even a front fence, without putting a DA on it. And there's a lot of red tape.
Yeah.
And for, good meaning, like to destroy something, it's some of these building techniques and materials aren't available anymore. So
right. I imagine there'd be a lot that fall into that category of being 50 years or older that you look at and think, geez, is this worth saving?
Exactly.
There's some rubbish out there.
Oh, yeah. Just obviously depends on the council and what they deem worthy of having that kind of heritage conservation label.
Yeah. And at the same time, there's a lot that is worth saving and a lot of benefits to making use of the resources that are already put into a building. And people say that the most sustainable building is one that already exists, but it can be really hard work sometimes to bring something up to a modern standard and make it comfortable and energy efficient while maintaining a 50 or 100-year look.
So kind of our philosophy in our company is build for 100 years. So everything that we do, we're always selecting the best materials, talking about how the construction is going to be done, and going far beyond the building code of Australia or the National Construction Code, because there are a lot of easy ways to build, but it's not necessarily going to be there for 100 years. Might be there for the 7-year warranty that some companies go for, but that's not us. We're always trying to have that 100-year-old minimum building quality.
And is that a hard conversation with clients? Because I imagine it's going to cost more. There's a cost implication to doing better up front. Or have you got a name for yourself now where clients come to you knowing that that's what you stand for?
Yeah. I have a whole bunch of philosophies now. Do it once, do it right.
Yeah.
Really push my clients to have zero fossil fuels for energy for their building. So abolishing gas, not allowing gas on the property, really pushing to get solar and batteries, and then talking about the building envelope. So that's one thing that some of my clients, they can't afford, like the German full design of a passive house, but they want to build better and they want to build future proof. So I educate them of how I will do it on their budget, and talk about, let's build the building first as a building envelope. And then if you're running short on money, put a cheaper kitchen in or a cheaper bathroom. And in 10 years' time, when you do have that money, the house is built and it's performing. You can always redo a kitchen. You can always redo a bathroom. Once the house is
how receptive do you find clients are to that? Because I mean, it totally makes sense. But bathrooms and kitchens are exciting, and they make great photos, and you can show them off to your friends.
Yeah, no, totally. I'm just selective with my clients, and I try to find the same people that have the same ethos as me. It's, I talk myself out of work every day, because I don't do the normal stuff, and I don't do it for a paycheck in regards to I need that work, and if I don't take that job, then I'm doomed. That's how my business operates.
How did you come across Passive House in the first place? Do you remember when you first heard about it?
Yeah, so one of my good friends was working for an architect, builder, developer, and I went to one of his openings of 3 townhouses in Newtown. His kind of ethos is just sustainability through and through. He had a green roof on it. He just had all these different techniques that he was doing things that people hadn't seen. And then my friend told me that he had found this technology called passive hulls. And the second I heard that he was doing it, I just researched it and pretty much booked a flight down to Melbourne and went and did the course for a week.
Was there anything, I mean, often people get tripped up by some of the concepts around particularly air tightness, because it's not something you probably would have got taught as a trainee builder. Did you have any sort of reservations about anything that you learnt there, this full-on German philosophy of building, and putting that in the Australian context, or did it immediately make sense to you?
Like it totally made sense to me straight away in regards to comfort, energy, controlling moisture content in the building. It's science. It's not something that you just best guess, where a lot of the kind of star ratings that we have in Australia, I don't believe that they're tested enough, and there's a lot of holes missing. But the one thing I definitely got torn with, and sometimes I can be a bit too vocal in my opinions, is the cost implications of comparing a passive house to Australian standard. And having this, I was thrown a really small additional percentage of building a passive house compared to the Aussie standard. And I still can't stomach it.
Yeah. So what's the argument there?
Well, the simplicity of our standards are poor in Australia. Like, to be frank, we allow single glazed aluminium windows, non-thermally broken. Pretty much people are living in tents. They just don't know it. They're losing 87% of their heating and cooling through their glazing. But this is a standard thing in Australia. And then you're pricing these really cheap windows and doors to a passive house, which is a thermally broken double or triple glazed window. And it's triple sealed, airtight. So the construction of these things, just of one element in the house, is more than 10 or 15%. You're talking double plus triple costs. But yeah.
So when someone says, it sounds great, but it's just like way too expensive compared to a normal, you basically don't even go there because you're not comparing.
That's it. So my kind of analogy for a passive house to Australian standard is you can build a Holden Commodore that's on fossil fuels, and it's also a company that's not around anymore.
True.
Or you can build a Tesla,
right?
That's sustainable, it's future-proof, and it's going to be better in the long run, and it's going to save you money. So people might pick the Holden Commodore because it's cheaper now, but they're not looking at the long game of, okay, this is probably the biggest investment in your life. 30 years, that's what, most people live in their houses for. And how much is that house going to cost you to live comfortably and healthy compared to something that's going to cost more? That's what I say to my clients straight up. It's going to cost you more, but the buyback over the lifetime of the house, and then also just all the health benefits, that doesn't even have a cost figure.
Most Australians would call Holden Commodore a valuable piece of Australian heritage.
Totally. And I'm not ragging on the Commodore. I actually don't care about cars. I'm not a car man. It's just an analogy. We can call it a Toyota Camry because they're still around if you want.
No, but I think going back to our kind of original, I think it is a good analogy, and it's a good example of just because something's old and we've got a place in our hearts for it doesn't necessarily mean it's something worth keeping, or at least not in its entirety. There might be certain things about that have value in our future, but not just adopting it wholesale. And changing the engine is a good example. Changing the power source, changing the in the case of the house, changing the way that we look at the building envelope. Because you can still have a beautiful Sydney terrace house that looks like it's been there for an early settler's cottage or something that's been there for 100 years, but it could be just really well built with decent quality windows.
That's it. So that's kind of my minimum standard, thermally broken double glazed windows. That's all I do. These things need to be adopted into legislation because supply and demand is not going to change, and price is not going to change unless it's done at a government level. For example, California mandated that double glazing be a minimum, and then after 1 year of double glazing being put into legislation, double glazing was cheaper than single glazing. Yeah. So it's hard to push against what everyone else is doing, but that's just my ethos.
We're going to talk about Pepper Tree because that is not a heritage building.
No.
It's quite a unique. It's a very unique building. First passive house in Illawarra, is it?
In the Illawarra
passive house in that region.
Yep.
But that's not the most unique thing about it. Tell us. Can you describe the house for those that haven't seen it?
Okay. So when I bought my property back in 2014, I had a huge pepper tree in the backyard. It would be, it's over 50 years old, so very established tree.
There's your heritage right there.
There you go, heritage tree. We have designed and built a secondary dwelling also known as a granny flat, around the tree. So it's kind of like two fingers that go around the tree, and there's a deck in the middle. So it's a 60 square meter dwelling with another 25 square meter deck in the middle of it. So it's approximately, it feels like it's about 85 squares.
And I mean, it's you can't see it without seeing the tree, because it's sort of literally wrapped around the tree. But that form factor doesn't necessarily lend itself to being passive houses, because it's not.
No, it's probably
a simple.
It's probably the
box.
anti-passive house.
Yeah.
So the optimum passive house is a rectangle on edge to heat and cool and air tightness.
Yeah.
We predominantly north facing glazing, all that kind of stuff. When I went and did the passive house course in 2018 down in Melbourne, I showed my lecturer the design of or the concept plans of Pepper Tree Passive House, and he straight up said to me, "That's not going to be able to be a passive house.
Not going to work." Yeah,
it's not going to work. It's the shape of it, the geometry, all that kind of stuff. I'm the kind of guy that if you tell me I can't do something, I'll do it just to prove you wrong. So it wasn't a linear road in regards to trying to get it to be, modelling it to be passive house. There was, between my architect, Alex Symes, and our consultant, and then also our thermal consultant in New Zealand, Jason Quinn, heaps of back and forths, reducing certain window to wall ratios. We had to put some huge overhangs. So if you see the photos of Pepper Tree House, we've got these huge overhangs on the western side, because obviously the summer sun, the heat loads coming from that, all these things had to be introduced. But what I wanted to prove was you can build a beautiful, strikingly architecturally designed house, and it can be high performance. You just have to find a way.
Yeah.
Because not everyone wants to live in a rectangle.
No. I imagine that the tree itself would have had to been taken into account for the shading and the thermal modelling as well.
Yep. So we actually we surveyed the tree and every limb, and modelled it within the design. We went through about 6 different concepts until we found what was going to work. I would sit in the backyard at night time and just try to envision how the structure is going to not just sit with the tree, but look like the building has been there for 50 years and the trees just sprouted around it.
Right.
Opposed to chopping limbs off and, just sticking a building adjacent to a tree.
No, I think you've achieved that pretty well, not just around it, but through it as well, with some of the limbs poking up through the deck. It's definitely well integrated into it. Yeah, yeah. And tell us a bit about the material selection, particularly inside, because it feels like you've kind of adopted that philosophy of relative simplicity, still beautiful and stunning in its own design, but relatively simple on the inside, with that architectural look on the outside.
Yep. So outside we've got burnt cladding. Kind of there was like a whole list of materials and techniques that I wanted to use on this dwelling that I haven't had a client contract me to do.
Not one brave enough.
Exactly. The shishiki barn cladding, a garden roof, just a whole bunch of different elements. I'm just looking at it now. What did you call that?
What is the cladding?
Shishiki barn. So it's Japanese for burnt cedar board, and it's a Japanese treatment where they char the cladding, and what it does, it brings the resins out and it chars them on the surface, and it makes it fire retardant and termite proof. they've been
And
doing.
does it come like that, or did you actually do that yourself?
So I worked with a builder in Austin, Texas years ago, and he built one of my cousin's studios in his backyard, and that was the first time I saw it. And after that, I was like, I want to do that one day. I looked at doing it by hand, as Mike did, but we had too many square meterage, so we outsourced it to a company down in Melbourne called Eco Timber Group. They've got like a recycled, renewable timber policy, and they've just got a dial. They've got conveyor belts, and they can control the charring. So there was 2 different levels of charring: deep char and just char. And they did a far better job than I'd be able to do by hand.
And so that means it doesn't require any paint or oils or any sort of protection?
So it came with one coating of Q-Tech penetrating oil once it came, and then once we erected it, just kind of like to get rid of when you're cutting everything, you get sawdust. And I don't know if you've ever worked with charred timber. Once you get sawdust on charred timber, you can't get it off. So you do one more coat of the Q-Tech, and it's got a black ash tint in it, so it just blacks out all that sawdust, and then that's it. We're just letting it age, and Any
problems from a council permission consenting perspective? Because you've got so many unique elements in here. I imagine some of the council inspectors might have been scratching their heads a bit.
Yeah. So there were a lot of conditions for council, but the planner came out and he pretty much just said to me, I love everything you're about. I love this project, and whatever you need, we will help you get it through.
Wow, that's cool. So
yeah,
you had a real good ally.
Wollongong Council were really good with us. It still wasn't easy though. A lot of conditions. We had to get a level 5 arborist to actually inspect the tree and give us the lifespan left on it, all that kind of stuff. Make sure it's not going to fall down tomorrow.
Because that might take half of the house with it, right?
Potentially, depending on which way it falls. The kind of the way it leans as well. If it was to ever fall, hopefully it doesn't. It would just fall straight out between the 2 fingers. So let's hope that doesn't happen in my lifetime.
Did you have to do anything special with the foundations?
Yeah. So the tree protection zone was an 11-meter radius, which was the entire building site.
Yeah.
So there was no mechanical excavation allowed. So the way that we had to engineer it, I had to be able to move my footings 500 mil either side of the location of the proposed piers. And we had to hand dig all the way down to rock. Anytime we clashed with a root system that was greater than 50 millimeters, we had to collapse the hole and start digging again.
Wow.
And then once we got down to rock, then we were able to bring my excavator in and core into the rock and get down to 400 kPa. So it's serious stuff. It was a very long exercise, but it's kind of what you got to do to respect the tree and make sure that you don't damage it, because that's the whole exercise was about, to celebrate the tree.
So is the bottom floor is it a timber floor? Not a concrete slab.
So it's a thermally broken building, so it's entirely made of timber. It sits on steel piers, but there is no steel entering the building envelope. It's just nicely sitting on top.
Right. Pretty amazing project. And I imagine some of that stuff you could probably do because it was your own, like I said, from a design point of view, but also spending time digging by hand. That could be quite an expensive project for a client. Where to from here? What's next for the house itself, and what's next for your company?
So the house is kind of a home office for me to work from. It's also a bit of a display home for my clients and potential clients and architects. I'm young. I'm turning 36 this year, which is relatively young for some of the things that I've produced.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what I've found, like starting my career, I really needed to jump hoops and, try to prove to people what I'm capable of with my team.
Mm-hmm.
Now I don't need to do that. I invite them over for a coffee, and the building speaks for itself, and the quality, and that was one of the main reasons I wanted to do it, because I was just sick of trying to convince people what I'm capable of. Now Pepper Tree does it for me, which is nice. And then we're using the office during the week, and then we had an interior designer, Alicia. She was amazing. I had very tricky it needed to be so many things, a display home, a company office, but then it also needed to be a parents retreat / friends and family stay over and for Airbnb. So
wow, that's quite a brief.
Yeah. So we've got fold down beds that if you fold up, I've got desks underneath. We've got pocket doors, where we've got like hotspots, like office hotspots. You can lock everything with like magnetic lock, so people can't get into it. Lockable filing cabinets, but it all had to look beautiful. Like you can't actually see any locks.
Yeah.
So on the weekend, my partner, that's her full-time job now, is besides looking after her 3 children, she's running Airbnb out of this. So
wow.
Yeah, on the weekend. So it's good. The first people stayed on the weekend, and they gave us a really good review. And
well, that's fantastic as well, to have people able to come and stay in a passive house as well, and get that experience.
That was it too. We kind of wanted to have that try before you buy.
Yeah.
Understand that in a passive house you can open the windows and doors.
How was it? So you've gone through a summer now. How was summer?
It was wet.
Yeah.
There wasn't really a
outside,
summer, to be honest.
Not inside.
Not inside. And this is the thing that, like right now, I'm sitting in here in shorts and t-shirt and super comfortable. No one's even been in here all night, and the temperature is 22 degrees, and the humidity, and that's the one thing that you really notice once you build a passive house, is sitting at 60%, and it's 100% humidity outside because it's fully raining, and it's 17 degrees.
Nice.
So super comfortable. It's kind of ruined me and my partner because we've got a nice house that we renovated when we bought. But there's only so much you can do without spending too much, overcapitalizing. So now we go from the nice, dry, comfortable house to the uncomfortable house that we're constantly having to put dehumidifiers on and heaters and air conditioning. So it has ruined us in regards to, now our dream house is obviously going to be a passive house.
Yeah.
But that'll be in a couple of years to come.
Nice. Hey, well done. It's a fantastic project, and I think it's already got quite a lot of attention, quite deservedly so, because of its aesthetic. It's so unique. And I think that's a great way to draw people in from outside the passive house community, because people, you've got articles on real estate review and sort of mainstream stuff, and then you can kind of slip in the fact that, oh, by the way, it's a passive house. It's got all these other, as well as looking amazing, it does all this other cool stuff as well. So and to have it open to people coming and stay, I think it's really great for increasing awareness of how it performs and the opportunity for passive house in Australian climate as well. So great effort, well done, and we look forward to more exciting and interesting projects to come.
Awesome. Thank you, Matthew.
And that was Adam Souter of Souter Built. He's based near Wollongong in Sydney, or just out of Sydney in New South Wales, Australia. Amazing project, definitely check that out. If you go over to his website, souterbuilt.com.au, you can also find various posts if you just search for Pepper Tree Passive House. And there's some pretty stunning videos and images of that project. What do you think, Zach?
Well, it was amazing. I mean, a lot of our conversations on the podcast and at the accelerator are about finding, scalable, replicable, simple, affordable, just like things that can just take over the marketplace. Yeah. Exactly. This is everything this is not that. It is, and it's amazing. It's like proving, I mean, I think he kind of pointed to this. He's like, it's proving what can be accomplished, what incredible, crazy, beautiful, connected to this, like the spirit of this tree, what can be accomplished and still be passive house. If you put your mind to it and clearly probably some muscle to it when he was talking about the navigating of the tree roots with the footings,
hand digging his own holes, right, and then having to refill them if he comes across a root.
Yeah, exactly.
And move the hole. Yeah,
exactly. And but I think that what also came through as I was listening to it, was like, how does this work? And he's also being creative in what the building is going to be used as. It's used as a house, the office, a place for parents to come, and of course the Airbnb piece. So there's a ton of creativity that's going into this really amazing place.
The Airbnb is awesome. We need more of those because you really need to try before you buy, and the experience of spending a night or even just coming into a passive house, I think, is going to speak volumes more than the stunning pictures and just the beauty of the tree and the form factor of the home that lends itself to beautiful photos. But there's nothing like actually going in there, particularly on a really hot Sydney summer day or in the middle of winter, and feeling how comfortable it is. And if you get the opportunity to spend a night, and if more people from outside of the passive house tribe are attracted to something like Pepper Tree just because it's a beautiful place, and then experience it and go, wow, this is actually really comfortable, then that opens up that conversation to why it's comfortable, and things can go from there. You're right that it's not a replicable plan, but there are some things that I do really like, not least of which is the recycling of some materials, which we didn't get into, but just after we were recording, which Adam and I were chatting, there's an image there where you can see what looks like bricks on the floor, they are reclaimed, which was partly related to his background in working on heritage, and he managed to reclaim some bricks, and they're actually sawn in half and then laid as sort of thick tiles, and he's also placed them in such a way that they get sunlight onto them, so they're acting as a bit of a thermal buffer as well, and storing some heat energy. So again, it's probably another example of where he spent quite a lot of labour of his own time to create something unique. But that idea of reclaiming materials is a good one. The other thing that strikes me about the interior is that it reminds me of Joe Lythe's house, which we've had on the show before. Joe did build a house with the budget in mind, and his general philosophy was to make the inside, the cladding, very simple. And it was just exposed strand board, nothing flash. And his idea was that he's got a young family. Kids tend to be a little bit rough sometimes growing up, and he wanted to put or most of his budget in the windows and the wall systems and things that are not likely to be upgraded later in life. And Joe, who's an architect, had a crack and built some bench tops and did a lot of the interior himself using relatively cost-effective materials, with the idea that those interior linings can always be upgraded, but you're not likely to replace the windows.
Yeah, no, that was struck me too when I was looking at photos, and we need to make sure that I'll include the link to the article that has a lot of great photos in show notes. But I was thinking exactly about the kind of similarity there in the choices in the interior. Both came from a place of just real strong intention, I guess, or just like unconventional thinking. I think it was but in both cases, like, well, it's an uncommon interior finish, the wall treatment, but it's beautiful in its own right, and I think both designers are very clear about that.
There's another house which I've spoken to an architect in Perth recently. Was our previous episode, Ben Kane from Lean House, and there's another similarity with this house in the way that they've dealt with shading and eaves, and not in a traditional sense of having a roof line that extends over the roof, but having windows that are quite heavily set back and are almost like the building sort of wrapping around, and there's sort of windows a little way back from the extreme exterior of the building. And that's an interesting approach, I think, to a more contemporary look that I think is attractive, and I think it's really exciting to see the Australian architects and people designing in warm climates that are really having to get creative when it comes to shading and preventing overheating, because that tends to be the design threshold. It's easy to, relatively easy, to put in enough insulation and seal it up properly so that you're not going to lose heat in winter. But I think it's probably a little bit more challenging to design well for warm climates. But we're seeing that some Australian architects getting quite creative and very successful at doing that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. The Lean House and Pepper Tree share some, they seem a little bit like cousins in some ways. I mean, they're very different. Yeah. They're very different in many ways. And the Lean House was about a very simple form, for example, and simplicity in design, and Pepper Tree is more complex because it's wrapping around a tree and all sorts of stuff. But they do feel like cousins, and so it almost feels like maybe there's a move toward perhaps a new vernacular in house design. There certainly needs to be a move to new vernacular as the climate is changing. So it's fun to see these really talented designers playing with that.
Yeah. The other thing that stands out for me talking to Adam is something that I pretty much see every time I talk to a builder who's been on a passive house project, is this real sense of pride in the project and getting back to, I guess, the roots of learning, mastering a craft and having attention to detail. In this case, we kind of joked about how much it's been a bit of a labour of love, because it's got lots of uses, including some personal use for this particular project. But you couldn't achieve a project like this without having a real high level of attention to detail. And I definitely get the sense that it's work that Adam's truly proud of and really enjoys bringing people into it to have a look.
This is a theme that has been coming up recently in our Passive House Accelerator Live events. We had a couple of events in a row that are focused on single family practice, and including a presentation by Daniel Kress about talking about the cost of what does passive house cost, and looking at that analyzing that in single family homes. And I think that Daniel's point is that it's cost effective. His argument is that it costs, the incremental cost of passive house and single family is the cost of a cup of coffee a day. And of course, there's all sorts of debate around that. But he also comes back and says, at the end of the day, though, it's really about, what do we need to build, not like what are we doing right by the planet. And Sean Santamore had a similar comment last night, and it was, well, what does it cost? What's the cost of building right? It's the cost is so that's not to be like cavalier or blithe about the incremental cost. We do need to dial that in, and there are a lot of smart people who are working on making that happen. And let's remember that we're also creating places that will be resilient, healthy, safe havens when we have crazy weather,
as they have been having. I said at the outset, in lots of New South Wales and the eastern part of Australia is still getting really severe rainfall, which generally is a good thing when you get a little bit of rain that part of the world, but too much of it can cause real problems. We're seeing more and more of those extreme events. So yes, fantastic to have projects like this. Check it out. I'm really excited to see it operating as an Airbnb, and I'd like to see more of that around the place as well, so that people can experience passive house from people from outside the community, just get the chance to go and feel what it's like. And I think that'll help convert more people and realise what effective buildings actually feel like when they spend time in them.
You're here. Thanks for getting this interview, and it was really great.
Pleasure. Now, you alluded to the fact that you've been pretty busy over at the accelerator recently. This morning. Definitely.
This morning we had a really fun event that we produced in New York from the Engine 16 construction site. That's the historic firehouse that's being retrofitted to a multi-unit passive house, all electric building. And so the announcement of round 3 of the Buildings of Excellence program by NYSERDA, the New York State Energy and Research Development Authority, happened there today. And so we presented that and did this whole live stream and had a whole a TV crew there and stuff. It was very exciting. And a reminder of the really important leadership that New York State is playing in this space, and that they're recognizing how critically important the low operational carbon of buildings is going to be for the future kind of viability of what they want as to be a clean energy grid, right? Like buildings are a key piece of that transition. So really, really grateful for NYSERDA's work. And we have lots of stuff coming up, of course. So maybe I'll segue into that. This coming week at Passive House Accelerator Live Construction Tech Edition, we are joined by Marcel Souter of the Econ Group in Vancouver. He's going to be diving into insulation. So what wall assembly and insulation type should I use? And so the month of April is Super Insulation Month at Passive House Accelerator. So
I like that. Super Insulation Month.
And Marcel he's presented once before on the program. He's really fantastic, super fun, and super knowledgeable. And so hope people will join us for that, of course, on Thursday your time. And then there are some conferences coming up, and I have a lot of information about North American conferences, but they're ones or summits and other things. These are all accessible online, so they're really accessible to anyone, anywhere in the world, depending on what time you're willing to take in a conference. So, for example, we've got the FIAS Developer Summit happening April 26th through 28th. We've got the Humid Climate Conference, May 1st and 3rd. I'm going to be speaking at that one. It's a hybrid conference, so it'll be in person in Austin, Texas. appropriately enough for a humid climate conference, and also online. So I think that there's some probably some lessons to glean from that for folks in Australia, depending on where you are there. And then we also have a Green Building United's, so that's May 1st through 3rd. And then we also have Green Building United's 2022 Sustainability Symposium on May 6th. So you can also tap that virtually. So lots of exciting stuff coming up in just a couple of weeks. There's also other ongoing things. BX has a Passive House primer, for example, this coming week. We'll have links to all of it in show notes.
And I should also mention don't forget to check out your local Passive House affiliate, whether it's affiliate of the Passive House Institute or Fierce. There's too many events for us to mention each week, but there's a lot of local stuff going on, local catch-ups, webinars happening. Lots of I know the webinars are being organised by the International Passive House Institute, so check all those out. And if there's not stuff happening in your local area, then get something going. Get a group of people to do some meetups, and now that we're doing that sort of thing in person again, it's a great time to get together with local people in your area.
Definitely.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for that, Zach. Good to chat. You need to have a rest after that very cool event.
I'm ready. I'm ready for a nap.
Looking forward to more of those coming up. Some of those excellent Passive House Lives. It'd be some awesome content there. And we'll be back again next week with another interview on the Passive House podcast.
Thanks, Matthew.